not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
Happy heresies, and welcome to the desert of the real. Heresy shouldn't be this much fun, and blasphemy shouldn't be this much of an amusement park. A joyride through the heavens of vital freedom. The dictionary calls blasphemy an, quote, impious utterance of action concerning God or sacred things. Of course, any free-thinking or deep spirituality, by default, always raises the hackles of Jehovah and his slaves in the terra damnata.
Fuck damnation, man. Fuck redemption. We are God's unwanted children. So be it!
Thus, I lean towards playwright Paul Rudnick when he said, there is only one blasphemy, and that is the refusal to see joy. And that joy is our weekly odyssey here at Aeon by Gnostic Radio, through the gnashing rocks of orthodoxy, all the way to the farthest shores of imagination, where we can encounter the knowledge of our divinity. Maybe joy isn't exactly the right word, but perhaps bliss in the Eastern sense. Or perhaps a quiet giggling ecstasy when you've discovered a wonder you just can't explain. Or perhaps that wonderful exhale after you found out you just might be on the right path all along, to wherever you need to go to be a truer version of yourself.
It's been a brilliant journey of self-awakening. Now you've simply got to ask yourself this: what is happiness to you?
That is part of Gnosis, and Gnosis, or more like how to harness Gnosis in a modern context, is our topic on this early November, the year of our demiurge 2017. We are the Gnostics, the veterans of 1,000 psychic wars who have set the controls to the heart of the sun. Divided we stand, together we rise. We are the eternal passerbyers of the Gospel of Thomas, those modern-day Tom Sawyers who never stop asking questions until we fall into the forbidden catacombs of the deeper levels of truth, where our curiosity is deemed, well, blasphemy.
My father says that almost the whole world is asleep. Everybody you know, everybody you see, everybody you talk to. He says that only a few people are awake, and they live in a state of constant, total amazement.
The world has always hated us. Our sanity has always been in question, and our napalm poetry lights up the heavens with the infernal fire of forgotten gods. And just as we machine gun questions, we never stop searching for the higher realities and the mysteries that work for us and only us. Like Robert Ingersoll said, give me the storm and tempest of thought and action, rather than the dead calm of ignorance and faith. Banish me from Eden when you will, but first let me eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And it was Clark Emery who said, the awakening of any individual is a cosmic event. And it is I who often say, the awakening of any individual is a cosmic rebellion.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.
Oh, and who am I? I am Abraxas, that terrible god above God as the ancients knew him. That cock-headed solar logos. In my monkey space incarnation, I am Miguel Connor, broadcasting from the lawful but frigid dystopia of Chicago, patiently waiting for the beginning of the world. As mentioned, our topic is Gnosis. How to harness, even distill it in a modern context. Our astral guest is Reid, who materializes at the virtual Alexandria to discuss his new book, The Return to Gnosis, Knowledge of the Sacred and What Keeps Us from It. You're gonna get this dope in the interview. Return to Gnosis is a personal book detailing Nick's quest to understand this spiritual tech, drawing from different cultures and traditions, but anchoring to the contraband wisdom of the ancient Gnostics. Like any good modern Gnostic, it's a didactic adventure back to the Garden of Eden to eat from the tree of knowledge, and then burn the rest down.
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Nick is an author, speaker, social entrepreneur, activist, surfer, and modern mystic who constantly works to spread passion in the sacred side of the world. He consults, coaches, and provides wilderness-based rites of passage / coming-of-age programs for youth and adults in the community. For more information on Nick, please visit, yeah, you got it, returntoGnosis.com.
Once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
Enjoy the first part of our ethereal but useful interview with Nick. Members will get the second part. Please join at thegodabovegod.com, as I truly need your support to keep this Red Pill cafeteria open. Thank you so much, oh you Aram Czech Avengers who support on a weekly basis. I can't do it without you. It's not easy keeping this Hobbit podcast going, but you do make it possible.
I gotta have more cowbell!
Yes, Gnosis, 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 Gnosis. What is it? I'm sure many of you still ask. Here's a little primer, taking from the definition Bart Ehrman gave in my book, Voices of Gnosticism. In the case of Gnosticism, Gnosis is the very basis of salvation. One comes to Gnosis by having it revealed to that person, and through that revelation is awakened from ignorance, from sleep, or from drunkenness, which are the various metaphors that are used for the state of the human being before he or she received Gnosis. Once Gnosis is revealed to that person and is accepted by that person, it's ultimately the basis for integration into the world of the divine from which that person had originated. One of the essential features of Gnosis in terms of its content is that the knowledge that saves is the knowledge that the world in which we live is not the eternal world and our innermost beings are divine, and consubstantial with a divine being who is beyond the world, and ultimately is not responsible for its creation.
Who am I? That's the real question, isn't it? Who am I? Who are you? What other questions are there? What other questions are there, really? If you want to understand the universe, embrace the universe, the door to the universe is you.
I also like this quote by Stuart Holroyd from his great primer, Elements of Gnosticism. Unawareness and ignorance keep man enthralled to the Archons. It is knowledge, Gnosis, alone that can liberate him. Knowledge of the transcendent God and of the divinity within, and also knowledge of the way to combat or outwit the Archons and enable the soul to achieve the reunion it yearns for. This saving knowledge cannot be discovered in the world, the realm of darkness. It must come from the realm of light, vouchsafed either by revelation or illumination, or brought by a messenger, a transcendent savior.
By the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe.
And remember, as I bring up the words of Jeremy Puma, that Gnosis is not the results, it brings results. In the end, that transcendental experience or feeling of wholeness is sublime and indescribable. That is where Gnosis leads, and that is for you and only you. And you will find so much joy and so much ecstasy in the end. So full of blasphemy at the edge of sanity. Let us find out more with our interview with Reid. Let us return to Gnosis. And it's about time. Write your own gospel, live your own myth.
We are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. Murder, crime, poverty, these things don't concern me. What concerns me are celebrity magazines, television with 500 channels, some guy's name on my underwear, Rogaine, Viagra, Olestra.
Martha Stewart.
Arthur's polishing the brass on the Titanic. It's all going down, man. I say never be complete. I say stop being perfect. I say let's evolve. Let the chips fall where they may. That's me. I could be wrong. Maybe it's a terrible tragedy.
No, it's just stuff. It's not tragedy.
Well, you did lose a lot of versatile solutions for modern living.
No, it's... My insurance is probably going to cover it, so... What?
The things you own end up owning you.
This is the A.M. Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of being joined by Nick C. Reid to discuss his book, Return to Gnosis, Knowledge of the Sacred and What Keeps Us from It. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. And joining us, we've got the Moondog himself, Vance. How are you doing today, Vance?
I'm just peachy.
Peachy. Good. Nick, why don't we start a little bit about yourself? Tell us about yourself and how you came to write Return to Gnosis.
Okay, so Return to Gnosis came out of a journey which I talk about in the beginning of the book, which is I'm kind of going down this path, the wide path that everybody goes through in our society. And I meet people who have taken this path much farther than I have, and they don't look like they're really in a place that I want to get to. So I had to look at my life and figure out, well, where the heck is it that I do want to go, and what is important? And I had a little epiphany while I was surfing one day and realized that, there are some moments that when you have them, they're so worthy of your full presence and participation that, there's nowhere else in the world that I'd rather be. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to end up anywhere, it better be somewhere where I can say that. So, and that was kind of a peak experience, but the journey turned into more of like a plateau experience. I was looking for how to get that in the rest of my life and everywhere, not just out surfing a wave or flying down a mountain on a snowboard. And it really came down to this. So I got to tell you something about my grandmother, actually, who raised me a little different. And she would tell these stories growing up, some of which were outlandish and some of which were totally ordinary. But in all her stories, everybody that she meets, everyone that's in her life was the most amazing person, just so rich, and everything that happened to her was such a gift. And then when I got older, I would listen to these stories and I'd say to myself, no, it was not. You didn't have any better parents than anybody else. You didn't. Yeah, And so, but for her, it really was. That's really the way that she experiences it now in her old age. And I really wanted that when I get older. And I can't help but think that in the end, she wins. Like, because it doesn't matter what has befallen her in her life, she's been able to squeeze some nugget of gold out of it and get some wisdom or some knowledge or a funny story or growth and learning or whatever. And so really, like, it was just a very empowering experience to go over to my grandmother's house. And so that's a big theme in the book too, is I'm looking at a lot of different experiences that are, more on like a spiritual experience dimension. And I'm looking for a golden nugget of wisdom. I'm looking at things that have befallen me and how, and basically I wanted to inspire this and other people.
Yes, your book is definitely inspirational, and yes, I could tell your grandmother was a big influence, for example, in your chapter, The Philosopher's Stone, and it sort of reminds me of, I always like to talk about Tom Robbins and saying it's never too late to have a happy childhood, and all of us must write our own gospel and live our own myth. It seems your grandmother did that. She wove myth and reality to have a very good and wise life, to reach wisdom. So, yes, I could definitely get that vibe from it. But what about the title? It's Return to Gnosis. And this is a question I ask a lot of guests, and that is, what to you is Gnosis?
Right. Well, and, I don't actually know the author of this definition, but the best definition I've ever heard of is the direct and non-discursive cognition of reality that includes both the spiritual and the secular elements. But that's so dry. So I wanted to say my personal, like, I vibe with that, in my head, but in my heart, Gnosis to me is an undeniable sense of what it's all about. It's the sense of what makes life worth living. It's the sense of things that makes all the effort that it takes to exist worth it. That's what Gnosis is. And it's not a knowledge like you can get in school, or you can read a book, or you can memorize a definition or something. It's something that you have to know for yourself. And it's kind of moves into the poetic and the ineffable, and so that's what it is to me. And it took a book to write about what it is.
Yes, indeed it does. And I think that's a great definition. So I want to bring in Vance. And what do you think? Because obviously we've had many discussions in our Facebook Inner Sanctum of Gnosis group about the definition of Gnosis. What do you think, Vance? Do you think that the intellectual side is part of Gnosis, or what's your take? And of course, Nick, if you want to weigh in after that, please do so.
Oh, most definitely. I can understand that definition because it's kind of the reality that we think we live in every day is really constructed from verbal things that we are taught. And to really get what I think is Gnosis, my personal experience of it, does mean that you have to dig through to something that's more real. So that's what I hear Nick saying, and I agree.
Yeah, it's a deeper level for me. Like, I can know something in the intellectual, like I look at a tree and I know that the air that I breathe out has the carbon dioxide that tree breathes in, right? And that tree breathes out the oxygen that I breathe in. But I know that in my head, right? I don't experience that. I know it just on like a third grade science level. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, direct experience.
Exactly. So I'm talking about an experience of relationship, of just direct knowledge and personal relationship in life's truths and mysteries, to the point where you know what those words are about. You know what I mean? And that's something that, like, when I have conversations with people that are highly religious, my mother was the first. She was the crusader in my life. Very, very Catholic, by the book, dogmatic. And, I could kind of jibe with the Christian symbol set, but it wasn't really until, I started having some really out there experiences, surfing or maybe doing some ayahuasca or something like that, that I felt a whole different layer of understanding when I would hear some of these religious symbols, and a big element of this for me in determining like what is Gnosis and what are we talking about is this sacred and the profane dynamic. You know what I mean? Sacred and the profane.
Oh yeah.
Like if I were to say
Definitely.
the mother, you know, and someone is listening for it in profane terms, they're going to think about your mom. But if someone has ears for the sacred, they might hear it as kind of like this archetypal symbol for the mother, and what does that mean? The reproductive, the producing, the source in a sense, the feminine source, you know what I mean? So there's this sacred and a profane dynamic to it. And yeah, so I'm going to leave it right there.
This is really good, and I like how I think it's in Latin the words sacred and profane are the same. I mean, as some have said, yes, that Jesus is both the sacred and the profane. He's at many levels and many symbols at once. It's that sort of non-duality vibe that people sometimes miss about the Gnostics, although, of course, there is a duality. So, Nick, tell us, you were raised Catholic. What were some of your influences that pulled you into the esoterica? Because obviously by reading your book, there's a lot of influences, hermetic, alchemical, and all of that. But to unpack more or less your life, what were some of your influences as you grew up? And, well, you're still growing up, right?
I'm still growing up.
We all are.
But if you tell somebody not to do something, they're going to do it. So you tell somebody not to forget their keys and not to, instead of remember their keys, they're probably going to, I'm joking, but that was part of it. I'm looking at a magnet on my refrigerator right now that says good ideas don't require force. And I don't know why that's standing out to me in this moment, but I think that that's kind of what led me in this direction. I mean, there's the religions contain powerful messages. I mean, like you're saying about Jesus, fully divine yet fully human, and then here are these Christians who strive to be more Christ-like. I mean, it's beautiful metaphor, but like Joseph Campbell would say, we kind of really gets hung up on the dogma and the historicity of it, and we miss the message. And so I wasn't getting the message from the people who were, the leaders of religion and the influences of religiosity in my life. And so I was just getting the crusade pretty much. And there's something instinctual inside of me that said, if you have to sell something, if you have to force it, then it obviously can't sell itself. And so
or threaten people, right?
Right. I mean, we went around the whole world just basically giving every indigenous person on the face of the earth through the Crusades and the Inquisition and Manifest Destiny and all the rest of it. We put them at gunpoint and gave them the option either to submit and join this new world order, so to speak, and stop practicing their religion, stop speaking their language, stop acting in their culture and take on this one, or ultimately face torture and certain death. So tell me about in a free market, if that would be somebody that you could see believing in their product. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's very interesting too, because you're talking about thinking, and something you bring a lot in your book a couple of times is the idea of God, who quoted it? It said that that when we have a problem, we can't use the same thinking that caused the problem. Who was that? That was it was Einstein who said it.
Yeah, I'm actually wrong about that. It's somebody else, but so commonly misattributed to Einstein, like I did in the book. And I can't think of her name now, but she's an author. She published this book in 1984, which is a interesting year. But yeah, that's such a fantastic quote.
So what would you say to people what advice do you have for people for that? Because it is very hard to actually shift your thinking when you do have a problem. But in essence, you really do have to, not even your thinking, but your consciousness. What advice do you have for people for that when problems come to their lives?
Forget about politics and religion and talk about everything in terms of your personal life. If I had to give advice, that would be it. When we talk about things in terms of politics, you're expressing things in terms of, fiscal conservative or socially democrat, or in religion. I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, you believe this, do you believe in that? And it's so confusing and creates so much division and conflict. And they're really artificial barriers. You can say the same thing using two different words or languages or symbol sets and totally not understand each other, but be coming from the same place. But I find when I talk about things in terms of my own personal values and where I'm coming from in my life, then there's a beautiful connection and I'm able to move way forward. And things become so simple at that level where you're thinking about you and personal relationships and your direct experiences and not supranational, macroeconomic and, levels. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially in this day and age when it seems politics and everything is so complicated, not even complicated, but it seems to permeate every part of our lives. I mean, what you definitely in your blog, you do talk about in one of your articles, let me pull it up here, which I enjoyed a lot. You talk about the New World Orderism, a social pathology, which you can find at Nick's website, returnofgnosis.com. Tell us about that article, which I really enjoyed.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. I was looking at it from a psychological perspective, and I brought in, I tied it to the Archons, but it was basically, it's talking about this desire to keep joining something larger and larger and larger, which I think is a very natural instinct. But in the political sense that we're talking about, it's happening on so many more levels than just this centralization and consolidation of power that we see today in the political and in the religious and economic and other realms. But it's something that people do. And so I bring in psychoanalyst Eric Fromm, who talks about the human condition, growing from a baby up into a full-grown adult, where at first you're totally dependent, on your mom. Your mom is life. Your mom is everything. And then you move and take steps toward independence, right? And you can crawl, and then you can talk, and then you can walk, and then you learn to take care of yourself, right? And then eventually you become your own mom and dad internally, right? And you become an independent adult. But as you become more independent, there with it also comes like this sense of alienation and isolation if you don't learn to bridge this gap across universes between you and the rest of the world, you and the other people, and relate in a healthy and loving way. Then that can be like a real prison of isolation, and there's a lot of power in it, and it can drive people to other ways of dealing with this problem of human separation, such as escapism. And so the New World Orderism that I'm talking about is a social pathology, is kind of, in a sense, what people do when they feel this sense of separation and they want to get rid of it. So, like, let's say you have a conflict with your wife or something, and then you just say, okay, honey, I'm going to do it your way. Or you force her to do it your way, You could think of slavery as an example of that. You could think of, there's a lot of examples. But basically, whenever I try and force my will on somebody else, right, then I get rid of this sense of human separation because I get rid of them. If there's no other, there's nobody to be separate from, right? They're just an extension of my will. I got them to do what I want. I controlled them as a, government or whatever. But then the other way is you get rid of yourself. And that can be by submitting to an ideology, submitting to a belief system, submitting to a legal system, submitting to, you join the football team, you join whatever. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of these, but there's a certain approach that people can take where it is an act of submission. They want to lose themselves in it, lose themselves in the music, lose themselves in whatever. And that is, this psychoanalyst would say, a form of like a temporary escape from the problem of human separation, when in reality, it's only temporary, because then you need a greater and greater escape. So the New World Orderism is, first we build, these states, and then we have nations, and then we have alliances, and then we have UN, global nations. But what's next? Galactic confederations. Like, we just keep having we need a greater and greater thing to lose ourselves in order to get the same effect. We're addicted to this consolidation and centralization of power, this domination and submission duality that we're experiencing, because we don't know how to love. We don't know how to have fusion with another person or people or the world, and yet keep our own integrity at the same time. And that's like a communion to me. You know, the fact that we have this sense of separation, that you're not me and that I'm not you, is just the springboard. It's the starting point for the most magical sharing. I mean, thank God that I'm not alone in this world. Thank God that everybody doesn't think just like me and walk and talk just like me and believe just like me. I mean, how boring and lonely would that be? I want to know what you think. I want to know what the world looks like from your corner of the universe. That's enriching to me. You know, thank God I don't have to learn from all my mistakes and experiences alone, and I can hear from you, and I can share this experience with you, because life can be so rich, you know. And I think that right now where we're at is we're reaching like the maximum point at which this is like the last thing. When we finally say we have a one world government and everybody submits to the control systems of whatever, and that's going to save us from ourselves, then when that doesn't work, there's nothing left. I think that's like, as in terms of the collective human consciousness, that's rock bottom. We're like, okay, there is no stronger drug. And that's the point at which I think it's going to give birth to this beautiful new approach, which is going to come from having direct knowledge and personal relationship again. No more anonymous transactions. No more you're just a number, your social security number or whatever. You know, it's going to bring back the personal element. It's going to bring people back in their skins. And it's going to be painful, but so is birth. You know, it's the birth pangs. And I want people to see it as a beautiful opportunity, because without this where you can have this other way of trying to deal with the problem of human separation, you could never be able to appreciate a more healthy way of doing it. So really, I mean, you can't have the light without the darkness. Out of the muck of the Nile comes the blue lotus. And so that's how I see it. And that's what New World Orderism is when I'm talking about it as a social pathology.
Well said, well said. It's a great struggle of the individual and the collective. Do you have a question, Vance?
Well, first I have to get rid of my pyramid hat.
And the big eye.
And the big eye, yeah, my Illuminati card. Nick, I really hear what you're saying. And I'm sitting here thinking about brands. You know, people buy things according to brands. They don't actually look at the product. They don't experience the product. They said, well, I have a Mumble brand thing and I'm got the best one. And he says, no, I've got the Frats brand and mine's the best. And do you see that the way I do? Or religions are it's like a brand, you know?
Absolutely. Joining the tribe. Joining the tribe. And, you know, I think there's something very natural about that, don't you? Like, you know, having some sense of community. I mean, for like hundreds of thousands of years, haven't we had big puberty rites where we initiated the youth into a community of adults and into a sacred cosmology and sacred story? And, you know, we imparted the wisdom and the values and the culture. I kind of feel like, because the community doesn't show up in our coming of age process in our culture, at least for the last 200 years or so, that this is kind of like an attempt at self-initiation. Don't you think? Like, you know, marking that transition to adulthood, kids are marking themselves, you know, getting tattoos and piercings and mohawks and doing outlandish stuff and all the other risky behavior that comes with adolescence. And then your brand, it's like you're looking for initiation. I mean, we don't have mystery schools, so you go and get a gang initiation, or you have a military initiation, or you join your brand, or you join you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like the dark side of unity.
Right.
You trade yourself for a symbol.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. But that's interesting point you bring up, Nick, and you certainly bring it up in your book, and that's the idea of initiation. You, of course, bring up Joseph Campbell, and he did a lot of work on men and women being initiated into responsibility or adulthood, or facing as he called it, the horror of the world, when we just gotta get out of being a child, and like you said, the painful process of from birth to childhood to adulthood. So what would you say are your ideas on initiation?
Initiation to, well, first of all, I think this got a bad rap because of fraternity initiations and hazing and military pseudo initiations and Freemasons and so on. Maybe not Freemasons. I don't know anything about them, but initiation just means to start. I mean, you initiate a project, you put your car in the ignition. Actually, that's not the same word, but same thing. Like you're starting something, and
it's an
and
ignition. It is an ignition of sorts, but you're right. Go ahead.
Initiation it's important because, there's something you can't give people what you don't have. And so when we're running around trying to initiate ourselves, I think that it's like the blind leading the blind, which is also an old metaphor. And the elders, this used to be their job. I mean, we throw them in nursing homes, but there used to be, there was a very, very vital and central role that the elders had, who have lived, I don't know how long they lived back then, maybe 60 years, 70 tops, but they lived the longest. They had experience, they had wisdom, they had knowledge, and at the same time, like, they knew what was important. They're sitting here staring death in the face. Like, nothing could be more of a catalyst for making you think about how do you want to spend this time. And so to be initiated into that a sacred story or a sacred cosmology is very important. And we just don't have it today. I mean, the turning of the tassel when you graduate just is not going to cut it. It's not powerful enough. And they had, I mean, we all know that the Egyptians used hieroglyphs. Like, they didn't write with the characters that we use today. They were symbols. They were images, and I think we know that images speak more to the subconscious mind, or at least a deeper level. But I think that, the ritual process also can speak to a deeper level. And it's important to have gestures with intention, like an intentional process where people are setting the intention for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? And like, people think about ritual today and they go to church and they sit and they kneel and stand and sit and kneel and stand and do this and that. But I mean, it's not like something weird, or it's not a demand. Ritual can be that, you tap the home plate before you hit the ball. I mean, baseball players do it. Everybody does it. But these were part of initiations for hundreds of thousands of years. And I definitely think that we need to start thinking about everything that we do. The word purpose, I'm jumping all over the place, but this is where I want to go with it. The word purpose, if you think about it, it has two things in it, per and pose. And if you think about it, if you think about intention, okay, and intentional ritual, it could bring a real sense of purpose into our lives just by having an intention, one intention per posture. Okay, if you think about, why am I stepping here? Why is my hand here when I'm walking? Why am I saying what I'm saying? Why am I here in this place where I am right now? What am I doing right now? You know what I mean? And you start thinking about the why and the why behind that and the why behind that and what's really matters and what really important. Then what can happen is the same thing that used to happen to the tribesmen in initiation, where they were born. Here they are against their will, or asleep at the wheel, or whatever. You're not conscious of being born, and you just wake up one day as a child and find yourself self-aware. Here I am. And then you go on and so forth. And then at some point, like, these rites of passage would give people the opportunity to give birth to themselves, an intentional birth, right? And it was also a death. Like, death wasn't the opposite of life. Death was the opposite of birth. So you shed the old skins of what wasn't going to serve you in the next phase of life as you step up into being an adult, being your own mom and dad, taking responsibility for your actions, being accountable, having integrity, having a sense of interdependence with your community, a sense of morality, knowing for yourself what's right and wrong so that you can guide a child one day to know for themselves what's right and wrong, and so on and so forth. But when you get to that why, you can really cultivate that purpose to come alive as an active human being instead of a passive one. And so that's what I think the purpose of initiation is, and the need for it today, because people are asleep at the wheel, and we have huge hierarchies that we operate in the corporate world and in the religious world and in the political world, where everybody denies responsibility to their superiors, company policies, superiors' orders. They made me do it. I had to. You know what I mean? And nobody's really living. Nobody's really living for themselves. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah, well said, well said. Couldn't agree more. So tell us about how you encountered, or how our mutual friends, the Gnostics, influenced you. I mean, in your book, you do quote the Gospel of Thomas. You quote William Blake in your chapter of the Cosmic Mirror. So tell us about your relationship with the Gnostics.
My relationship with the Gnostics came when I went to Italy doing the Da Vinci Code, actually. Right. I was doing a study abroad, take advantage of it, kind of figuring out my life, but also going to the source to figure some stuff out, right? And I was going around from chapel to chapel and going in the Vatican, and I just remember trying. I don't know why I had such an idealistic, fantastic view of what I was going to find. I actually thought that I would be able to go to the Vatican, which would be like I pictured it in maybe the 18th century or something. And I'd be able to sneak past some guards and get into, the Vatican vaults and halls of records and library. And I'd be able to really figure some stuff out about the origins of the belief system I grew up with. Totally not like that. I mean, they are so advanced and have helicopters, and anyway, didn't work out. But I did come across in an international bookstore a book called The Lost Scriptures, and in it was the Coptic Gospel of Thomas. And I remember reading it. The first paragraph, it started off, he who finds the correct interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. And I was like, okay, well, that kind of piqued my interest. And then the next line said that, actually, I can't remember, but it blew my mind open because it was totally different than what I had read in the Bible. It was like one of the things that's different from in the Bible about the kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you. And if you will not know yourselves, then you would dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. But if you will know yourselves, then you will realize that it is you who are the true sons of the living Father. And I was like, I like that. And I know in Romans somewhere it says, he has a very empowering view.
Yeah, it's a great quote, yes.
It's a very empowering view. Oh, and it starts off, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky precede you. And I always thought heaven was in the clouds, so that really piqued my interest too. And it's like, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sea. And of course, that's science and religion say, we're just amoebas and so on and so forth. Kind of the profane origins of biological life. Then the fish of the sea precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and so on and so forth. But it was like, man, it had the sacred and the profane both in it. And I just got goosebumps on top of my head. Have you ever heard a song or you read something that just rings so true that you get chills?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, and
when you said mother before.
Yes, agreed.
my wife and I have a joke. Like, I have some authors and other people that I've read that I talk about like as if I just had a conversation with a friend. And she'll joke with me, oh, how's old Eric doing? Or, oh, how's old Thomas? Well, Carl Jung said that when he first came across the Gnostics, it was like being in the company of old friends. That's how I felt. And so it was a very empowering view. If I have to put my finger on what it was empowering that, we're not just hopelessly these souls trapped in a sack of flesh, and we need to be saved from ourselves, and the only way to do it is submission to a religious dogma or the rule of law or something like that. I had some very disempowering views, including I studied pre-med in college. I was going to be a doctor, right? And I'm sitting here in genetics, and they're telling me, you know, the theory of genetics, which is DNA to RNA to protein. And so I go, all right, well, where's the DNA come from? I'm kind of asking questions. And they're like, oh, well, don't worry about it. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, well, we don't know. It's the theory of genetics. Watson and Crick taught for 30 years. It's the best we got, but that's where we're at. And I'm like, okay, I'm looking 10 years down the line at med school, you know, who knows, maybe like $100,000 in debt. And I got a textbook in front of me that's brand new because the last one last year is already outdated. And you're going to tell me this bull? Like, come on. I mean, it's such a disempowering story that, like, we're just a victim of our genes too. I mean, what are these calluses on my hands? You know, that's a change in the genetic expression of those genes, the phenotypical expression. And they're harder and more dense, and they produce more of them. Calluses are rough. That's not hereditary. That's not random mutation. That's adaptation. That's Lamarck. That's, you know, coming from direct encounter with its environment, which is the weights I use in my home gym. So I've been looking for more empowering stories. And I didn't want to be stuck with those. And that's what led me to Italy. And that's what led me to the Gnostics. And that's why ultimately I am where I am today. I want to empower people. I've been given a lot. I feel rich, and it's just overflowing me, and I can't help but give back.
Tell us a little bit about your travels to Sweden. I think you've led a very interesting life. You've been to a lot of places, but reading your book, it seems, how do I say, you found a lot of Gnosis when you moved to Sweden.
Gnosis was everywhere, my friend.
Yeah, that is true. It is everywhere. But that seems to be definitely an influential part of your life. A lot of things happening there. There was a story of you and the immigrant, which I found very touching. Abdullah, yes.
Abdullah Blangada.
Tell us about that chapter in your book.
Well, I was on crutches, and I was at a point in my journey where I was really enjoying being able to be compassionate in the situations where it was really the most difficult for other people. And so I had some other experiences that had kind of opened my eyes to this. And so here I am, and I've injured my knee. I'm on crutches. I'm going to this language school so I can pick up Swedish, so I can, you know, make my career over there and whatnot. And there's people from all over the world there. I mean, people from Iraq, from Syria, from Israel, from Palestine. So it was a real mix, like, you know, and people who didn't have to get along either. People who came with quite a lot of baggage. And this was in 2011, 12. And I think it was kind of at the height of the Iraqi war. And so this guy was from Iraq, and he sees me and he hears me speak English to somebody in the halls. And so he shouts out, he says, "Hey, you are from America, no?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am. What's up? What's going on?" And he goes, "Hey, what do you think about Obama? What do you think about us Muslims? Is it true that on American TV, all they show is us Muslims extremists doing bad things, blowing up people and so on? Isn't it true that blah, 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 blah?" Anyway, so within the first sentence, he had already brought up politics and religion. And I was like, I saw two giant walls literally shoot up right between us, like Mario or something. And so, and I'm on crutches. I'm extremely vulnerable. And, you know, I've got a history of having to, you know, fight off bullies and stuff. And I did wrestling and boxing and MMA and stuff. And so here I am, and I'm on crutches, which could not have been a better situation to approach this the way I want to approach it. Because there's no way, this guy was huge. There's no way I could have defended myself if he got really triggered. So I totally, in that moment, just decided and committed to try and overcome these hurdles with this guy and blow his mind. And I was able to. And so I look at him and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, so look, I don't know Obama. All right. And no, first I kind of jive with him a little bit. I'm like, hey, isn't it true that on Iraqi TV, all they show is American soldiers doing messed up stuff to Iraqis? And he kind of looked at me. He's like, yes, this is true also. This is true. I'm like, and then I was like, okay, look, man, maybe they're playing us against each other. Have you ever met somebody from America before? And they're like, he's like, no. And I realize he's looking at me like I'm America. He doesn't see me at all. He sees America, right? And so I say, look, man, let me tell you something. I don't know Obama. All right. I don't care. And whenever you talk to me about this religions or politics, okay, I'm always on the other side of some fence. All right. You feel this fence? And I'm like, what I want when you talk to me is I want you to talk to me like I'm your brother. Okay. Because you don't know it yet, but we are brothers. And I was just a long shot, but I'm really feeling it. And so it just came out of me, and he kind of crossed his arms and looked at me cockeyed. And then he looked back at his other large friend and looked back at me, and he said, but that is how I want to talk to everyone, my friend. And I try to talk to people, and they always are talking about this and that. And it's so difficult to connect. And he invited me back to his house, and we ate dinner on his floor, some Iraqi food, and we talked about our cultures, and it was like a wonderful experience. And we became good friends over there, me and Abdullah. But I realized something, that this darkness, right, this delusion that's between us, right, when we start to connect with each other through these really artificial senses of identity and separateness, is an opportunity. It's an incredible opportunity, because if you can connect through those walls, it's like when the light comes and shines from out behind the clouds. It's just that much more powerful. If you have light all the time, how could you even say it was light? You know what I mean? But like with that delusion, with that disconnect, with the wall, with the darkness, the light, boom, people's eyes are sensitive to the light when they're in the dark. And it's an opportunity, guys. That's what that story was about. And it really opened me up to start seeing things that normally I judge as like undesirable situations to actually be desirable situations. And it was really empowering. Yeah. So that was a big eye opener for me in Sweden for sure.
Yeah, really, again, I thought that was a very touching story. And of course, it really summarizes what we've been talking about, the individual, the collective, the images that we see each other, and so forth. And another part I really enjoyed, Nick, was you describing the Laplanders. I thought that was an amazing thing about a people I didn't know anything about. So tell us about your experience with the Laplanders.
I didn't know anything about the Laplanders either, actually. But here I am one day, and I'm in Umeå. It's like 8 hours north of Stockholm, maybe 3 or 4 hours from the Arctic Circle. And I had met somebody who was a Laplander. And I just remember looking at this person, and they look like a Indian or a Inuit Eskimo, or like they have kind of slanted eyes, higher cheekbones, rounded face, like look just like a Native American almost, but white and blonde hair and blue eyes. And I'm like, what? It just like blew my world open. So anyway, we went up to, I think it was Mukyuk and then Kvikyuk and some other very indigenous sounding towns. Me and this French guy, and we met with some of the Laplanders, and we kind of had to play some politics in order to get to talk to him. And we started at a gift shop. That's how we got in, so to speak, was through a Laplander who had a gift shop, and they sold Sami knives and Sami reindeer hides and so on and so forth. But there were two interesting stories in there. Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about their customs and religion?
Definitely. Their custom and religions. The idea of how it ties into the mushroom and Christmas and all that.
One of my most fascinating discoveries ever. So we're talking to these guys, and they're telling us about, we're getting to know their culture and their religion. And I started to notice things like they would say, you know, they're the keepers of the reindeer. So all the reindeer in Sweden are owned by the Laplanders. They're the keepers of the reindeer and always have. And they're like kind of nomadic, and they herd them back and forth across the country as they migrate during their migratory season. And they would say that like the shaman, you know, would be pulled around traditionally by a sleigh of caribou. Because I saw them, they had like helicopters and they had, you know, four-wheelers. And I was like, whoa, you guys are advanced. But what'd you guys use before that? Did you just walk? And they're like, oh, we had sleigh. And I thought that was so interesting. Pulled by a sleigh of caribou. I was like, oh, cool. Well, anyway, the traditional dress of the shaman was red and white. So they had, I think it was red with white dots. That was like the shaman medicine man or woman's attire. And I wondered why there was like, well, that's interesting. Why red and white? Like, I don't see a lot of red and white around here. And they said, well, that's the color of our sacrament. And their sacrament was this mushroom. Its Latin name is Amanita muscaria. It's known as also the fly agaric. In Swedish, it's called the flugsvamp. And that's because flies land on it and then they fly off like they're drunk, I guess. But it's a psychoactive mushroom. And this psychoactive mushroom, the reason it's so interesting is because this mushroom grows in symbiosis with a couple notable trees, one of which is the fir tree. Okay, the fir tree is your Christmas tree. So the fungus grows in symbiosis with the roots, and it breaks down the soil and so on and so forth for the roots to absorb nutrients and water, and then the roots host the fungi. So it's like this symbiotic relationship. But this mushroom is found under the Christmas tree. Okay. And that's when I started to realize there's some connections between our cultural traditions and some of these old, ancient, indigenous shamanic traditions. Okay, when you have a medicine man or an elder dressed in red and white, pulled by a sleigh of caribou, okay, who finds mushrooms under the Christmas tree, you know, that's when things started to really get interesting.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Kidding, yeah.
So it was kind of like the Twilight Zone. I'm wondering, you know, where am I? Do they get this from Christmas? Or, I mean, surely not. We got it probably from them or some other similar tradition. But yeah, so also the Amanita muscaria mushroom is slightly toxic too. So you have to bake it or heat it and dry it in order to convert some of the toxic substance into the psychoactive. So you have to like actually have a transformation, some kind of primitive alchemical process in order to turn the water into wine here. And so they didn't have, I don't think they had ovens, you know, I don't think they had like, you know, meat dryers or vegetable dehydrators or anything. So I think it's been theorized, I did some reading after this, that maybe they hung it over the fire, you know, like we have stockings hanging over the fireplace. Isn't that interesting? Like, so anyway, I've been looking at our traditions that I've just done blindly my whole life, or the things that we just do or have. And I'm like, why the hell do we have that? Why do we do it this way? You know, and things have started to kind of unfold so I have a secret desire to live intentionally, okay, and live on purpose. All right. I've had like a lot of close shaves with death. And really, I'm not even sure I should be here right now. And so I've had to think about like, well, if I am here, how do I really want to live? You know, do I want to do things because they've always been done? Or, you know, do I want to understand why they're done and then choose whether or not I want to do them or do them totally different? You know what I mean? But like life's really getting more and more precious to me. And so things like this are really valuable.
And I also enjoyed your section on the mountain. I think Mount Ato. Is it that it's a mountain that has no name, right?
Right. Mount Ato.
Yes.
I think now on the map it's Autoklimpoa or something. Autoklimpen. But it means in the native tongue, that there. Like, and so when I heard that, I was like, I've got to see this mountain. This was their holy mountain. This was their holy place. And I was thinking about, my place, my sacred spot, which was surfing. Like, that was the place where there's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be, nothing else I'd rather be doing than exactly where I am and exactly what I'm doing in that moment. And I was like, and that was it. That was gold to me. Like, something that's so worthy of my fullest presence and participation that I have a moment more worthy than the rest of eternity being half present and half participating. You know what I mean? So like, then here's this Mount Atto, and I'm like, and they say it just means that there. And I think, my God, I want to see that. So we went on.
Kind of like their Mount Sinai, huh?
Right.
Did they feel that the deity or anything was there?
What'd you say?
Did they feel like the deity was up there, or whatever they conceived of to be the supreme presence?
Maybe, maybe. Like, maybe that was some, like a sacred symbol to them in some way, that it was more of like a inner landscape, it represented something in their interior landscape than it did just exterior beauty or something like that. That's interesting. I never thought about that. So I don't actually know, because nobody really knew that I could really get too much on. But we set out to find this mountain. And for some reason, I thought it was in Sarek National Park, the Lord of the Rings sounding Swedish national park, which is like one of the largest in the world, I think. And so we go to Sarek, me and this Frenchman, Axel. And he'd borrowed his friend's car. And we took off, and we got there, and it was pouring rain, and I think he backed this car into a pole, and it just ruined the whole trip from that point.
The Archons are lurking.
Yeah, I'd say, but it was a blessing in disguise. It's like some divine hand was guiding this, because if I had gone, who knows, I may have just found a mountain. But so we went to go try and fix this car, and we went from Kvikkjokk back to Mukkjokk, and then we went to another town, and we finally found like an auto shop, and they looked it up, and they're like, okay, so it's going to cost this much. And he's like, dude, there's no way I can afford that. I don't know what I'm going to do. My friend's going to kill me, Anyway, and like, so the guy asked our story, and we told him about our sacred quest, right? I felt like I was either in Monty Python's and the Holy Grail, or
what is your name? What is your quest?
What is your favorite color? So he's like, so what are you guys doing up here? What is going on? What is your story? Why is this so important? So we told him about our sacred quest, right? And it obviously touched him. Like, he was really, really fascinated and supportive. And so he didn't say a word. He went back in there, and he came back out with tools and just started working on this thing. And I'm like, whoa, what did we say? Like, we must have told him we were going to pay for, him to fix this car or something like that. We're like, whoa, dude, you need to chill out. Like, he can't afford it right now. And so he's like, no, it's fine. Don't worry. I got it. I'll talk to you in a minute. And like, so he fixed this car up and got it working, and the door, the trunk shutting, so that, that's what we need. This guy, his friends had kids, and they needed to take them to school every day, and couldn't have a trunk open. And anyway, like, we're like, all right, well, how much do we owe you? And he just said like nothing. It was kind of like a pay it forward moment, right? And just said like, the dude just helped us. And so I just remember that, looking and seeing this guy Axel, like, so caught off guard and not expecting this random act of kindness from this random Swedish car mechanic in some small town in the middle of the Arctic Circle. And there was just this moment. And I swear it was one of those moments where you get goosebumps on top of your head, like chills up your spine, man. It was a holy moment. And man, it meant something to this guy, like, deeply. I don't know what, maybe it was his integrity or accountability with his friend and taking care of the car, whatever. It meant a lot. and I saw it like I've never seen it. And it was a holy moment. And then we went hiking up and out from there, and we camped at the edge of the sea. And I remember going to sleep that night and dreaming that I stood at the base of this holy mountain, Mount Ato. And it was just like a very satisfying feeling. But it somehow was like, not that I was pissed that I didn't actually get to go see the mountain and I dreamed I went and saw the mountain. It was like, I didn't get to go see the mountain, but I saw what the mountain was all about and represented anyway. And it was a really powerful experience for me. And like the whole, I guess if there's a lesson to it, like the golden nugget of wisdom I got from it was that, whatever that's about, you can get anywhere, like that was a sacred symbol to them, but maybe not to me, like what I watched right there, that was a holy moment to me. That was rare. Maybe the Samis, like they helped each other all the time. It was all random acts of kindness. So that was nothing to them. But then they see this mountain,
Right.
And that was profound, So it was kind of like the relativity of it, like, not always chasing the exotic, that maybe it's right here, right now in the fabric of this moment in our own backyard. We don't even know it.
It's personal to you. So you see, you didn't have to buy into archetypical symbols that you didn't have a relationship with at that time.
For sure. Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. It was personal to me. Yeah. Big time.
And to me, that's what Gnosis is all about. What has meaning to us. I was curious, when I heard about your friend backing into the pole, have you ever run into the concept, the Gnostic concept of the Archons and so forth that's so prevalent in the ancient literature? And what's your take on that, if any?
Sure. The Archons, these little devil guys that I think they're described, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a Gnostic scholar like you guys probably are, but I read that there's a book, Not in His Image, by Lamb Lash or Lash Lamb.
Right, John Lamb Lash.
John Lamb Lash. Yeah, fascinating book. He described the Archons in some translation as like these feeble, kind of like a gray, aborted fetus, kind of like alive but not living type things. And they were all like subservient and controlled by this demiurge, which is like this dragon or serpent-like domineering, aggressive character kind of thing. And like my take on it is I take it like proto-psychology. That's how I look at it. I'm looking at here masochism and sadism. I'm looking at, New World Orderism. When I think of the Archons and these submissive little creatures that aren't living, that are controlled by this domineering demiurge, I see, our hierarchies and abuse of power. And I see it in myself, and I see it in my friends and my family. It's something we deal with every single day. That's like this principle or this I don't know. I think they call it the demiurge. Maybe it's an urge inside of us.
No, I think you hit it on the head, Nick. I know Lash likes to talk about them as mind parasites, and we had like a guest on recently, Frank DeVita, who also says that's what they are. Although he claims they actually do come from another world and they're mechanic beings. But at the end of the day, whether it's a literal mind parasite or it's our ego fragmenting us even more, like you said, with all these detrimental qualities, it's really the same battle. I mean, I let people take their own mythologies, take it as literal as they want, but at the end of the day, it's really the same battle. I'm not going to tell you, this is the Archons, this is exactly the Archons, but the battle is the same. The struggle is the same for freedom.
For freedom. I like that. And that's kind of like the point of Gnosis for me, is freedom. It's so liberating from some of the delusions that, we grow up with our culture. Have you ever heard the expression, like, it's not your fault you're screwed up, but it is your fault if you stay that way?
Oh, yeah. Very good expression.
That's a good one.
I don't know who said it. I think it was like a self-help author or something, but it applies to Gnosis, because the idea that you can have direct revelations, it can lead you to realize, that you're carrying a lot of garbage with you, but it's also like, it's the starting point, it's what got you where we are today. And I think it's quite liberating to kind of take a more proactive, healthy approach to it. The Archons. So like, I definitely don't want to get into talk about aliens here, but I've heard people talk about Archons as, oh, they're the aliens, they're the grays, and then there's the good Archons, and then there's the bad Archons, and then there's archangels, and those are not Archons. And they get into kind of this like really technical argument about, and it just kind of amounts to how many angels can dance on the head of a pin to me. But I think that, like, man, I always go back to Joseph Campbell, who said, like, what's the message? And not arguing like the technicalities or correct, the true believer definition of something, but like, what's its impact on you and everybody else? Even the Catholic Church, when some nun or priest or monk comes to him and says, I just talked to God. Oh my God, I've had a spiritual experience. Let me tell you about it. Is this authentic? Is this real? Or is this the devil talking to me and tricking me? Their criteria is, well, what's it done for you? What's it done to change your life for the better? How has it impacted other people in your life and those in your community? And I think that that's the most important thing when we're talking about technicalities. It's like, how does it impact you? You want to go on. You really believe that Archons are aliens or something, right? Well, what's its impact on you? Like, is it positive? Does that help you in some way? And that's what I really, if I could share one thing about this aspect of the Archon debate, it's, guys, what is it doing for anybody? Because if you're not doing anything meaningful for yourself or somebody else, it's not helping you. And my recommendation is to cut it out and make room for stuff that is, because when you come and you face death, okay, people who have been close or people who are old can tell you things that aren't mattering. I mean, you're just going to look back with regret. You want to look and stare at death and be able to look back, like in Genesis when they say, and in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he saw that it was good. That's what I want to do. I want to look back and every day as like a mini life and say it was good. And I hope that when I come to the big end of the big day, that I'll be able to look back and also say the same thing. And I'll be ready to go, ready for something new,
Like your grandmother.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, well said.
I'm going to share this with her.
Yes. I think you're spot on. I certainly agree with you. What about you, Vince? When people tell you who are the Archons, what is your answer?
Well, I have various things depending on the time of the year and the phase of the moon or whatever, and I kind of conceive of them as personalities, but kind of mechanical. They're the rules, like Nick said, the bureaucracy, the screw tape letters, the mysterious stranger, some sort of force, and that's built into the universe that seems to oppose us. But I don't see them as totally evil. I do see them as a unconsciousizing force, so to speak, and that's kind of the way I think of them. They're there. I mean, if they weren't there, we'd all of a sudden be conscious and we'd all be one and happy, and the end of the universe would be there because there would be no resistance. Time exists, so everything doesn't happen at once.
Right.
So they're our challenge. It's like the video game. It can't let you win right away. It has to have some sort of obstacle. So that's and that doesn't even describe it. That's why I see it, and you see kind of things like that, Nick. Is that? I
dig that. Guys, this dialogue is so enriching and stimulating. I got to tell you, but yeah, I dig that. Like if you have this personality type or this urge to, just be controlling or to be submissive and not really take responsibility, I think that there's something in that can lead people to wake up. that can lead people to realize a more healthy way of doing it, to realize a more lasting path to happiness, and kind of like a Buddhist approach to it. Because obviously controlling people are not happy, and neither are people who aren't really alive and are just, submitting to everything in the book, and I think that there's a sleepfulness in the whole Archon paradigm. Like,
oh yeah, we're the Archon sometimes too, right? The other night I was an Archon for a little while.
I'm feeling kind of Archon.
Well said, well said. Well, we're getting to the end, Nick. So if the listener, the audience wants to learn more about you, tell us where they can find you.
Fantastic. Well, you can go to amazingpersoncoaching.com, and that's where you can find my present work, which I'm really passionate about. You can go to passagebound.com, and that's where you can find my work on rites of passage. And if you want to find liberty-friendly alternatives and solutions to government-created problems, you can go to frontierliberty.com as well. I have a very large curated directory of tools and resources there, as well as a consulting service and blog. So that's what I got to offer for people. And I really hope it's been enriching. I've certainly enjoyed it, guys. It's been a very stimulating and dialogue, and really good to connect with you.
Agreed. And for the listener, the book is Return to Gnosis, Knowledge of the Sacred and What Keeps Us from It. And I certainly enjoy it. But thank you very much for coming on, Nick, and good luck with everything.
That would be returnofgnosis.com. The blog is returnofgnosis.com. It's also available on Amazon. Guys, I've just enjoyed this so much, I totally forgot what started this conversation. So, yeah, the book.
It's a living book. It's a verb book. So, and it's got its own hat. And thanks for being here, Vance, and keeping us company on this journey to that mountain.
Yes. Oh, it was my pleasure, and great to meet you, Nick. And keep up the good work. Hey, it's a good way to start a Friday for me.
Oh, certainly. You guys too. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. Nick Reid on a journey of Gnosis that will hopefully assist in your journey of Gnosis. And yes, his book is Return to Gnosis. The journey gets better in our second part, where Nick discusses more on this key spiritual tech. What's more, he delves into what is spiritual alchemy and youth initiation. That is the science on how rites of passage help them younger folk. And what's more, Nick takes us on a meditation/mind exercise where we learn to deal with the idea of conspiracy theories and any conspiracy theories that are eroding your sanity. It's very cool and very pompous of Gnosis. I mean, Vance and I felt better right after. Yes, and always. Only $5.99 a month to join. Complete and not partial shows. Access to 11 years of episodes. More than 375. Private RSS feed where you can listen to all complete shows. Invitation to our Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group, where we are building a community of mystics, madmen, and sages. I am always there to answer your question or issues and give you tailored news for you, and many of our past guests hang out there too. Only $5.99 a month, the price of an Edward Scissorhands hand job, or something like that. Same benefits if you become a patron at Patreon, except you get shows earlier than anyone. If anything, a few shekels here or there via PayPal or the US mail really helps. Let's keep this red pill cafeteria open, and let's keep that blasphemous content a-coming for the rest of the year. I really can't do it without you. Wish I had more to say, and maybe you're glad I don't. Even if Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio ceases to exist, it is my greatest hope you have found that Gnosis to finally become free, become authentic, and that ecstasy only a child of the Pleroma can understand. Hello and goodbye as always.